Welcome to Community Focus. I'm Hannah Bernstein. Today we're going to talk about the upcoming election for governor of Illinois. The campaign promises to be very contentious, and there are some issues about honesty and integrity that will be raised, I'm sure, by both candidates. My guests today have some things to say about this campaign, and particularly about the campaign for the Republican nomination, Jim Ryan. My guests are Tim Wingate, who is president of the American Rights Movement, and Carlos Rodriguez, who is a former DuPage County Sheriff deputy. Thank you for coming. And the elections are almost on our doorstep, and we haven't heard too much, but I'm sure it's going to get very, very hectic towards the last 2 months of the election. First of all, who are you? Can you tell us about the American Rights Movement?
American Rights Movement is very simply a private club of individuals who love liberty, and we are concerned about maintaining and preserving our American rights, which are based on the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And what we do is we do legal research. We help people prepare to litigate their own cases, pro se or pro per, if you will. We have educational seminars dealing with legal issues, also dealing with contemporaneous civil rights issues, and that's pretty much who we are.
Are you DuPage-based or Illinois-based?
We are DuPage-based, and we've been in Elmhurst for about a year and a half now.
And Carlos, you are a former deputy sheriff in the DuPage County.
Yes, I am a former DuPage County Sheriff's deputy.
You've appeared on my show before, and you were involved in some way with the Nicarico case at the later stages, and we'll probably touch on that briefly later on. Now, you have decided to focus your attention on the campaign of Jim Ryan. Is there any particular reason why Jim Ryan and not perhaps his opponent?
Well, what we have is we've started something called Operation Dump Lion Ryan. It's a unique, apolitical campaign on our part, not to endorse a particular candidate, but to give people reasons to not vote for Jim Ryan and also Joe Burkett. The reason primarily is we feel these two gentlemen have been terribly corrupt, starting back with the whole Nicarico case, which earlier this year I got involved with Carlos through one of our members who happened to know Carlos, mentioned, you got to hear this guy's story. And when I found out why Carlos had been fired and what he had actually done and how his firing was unjustified and it was wrong, that shocked my conscience. I thought, this is terrible. You have the Attorney General, who started off as a state's attorney here in DuPage County, who is entrusted by we the people to enforce the law for us. But when he breaks the law to enforce the law, he puts himself either above the law or above the rest of we the people, who not only empowered him, but also entrusted him with that. So what we did over a period of time, we had meetings, we tried to get this information out. We had several news conferences. Apparently, the news media is not touching the story. So we decided, all right, if that's the case, we're going to go back to a same thing that the Founding Fathers did, and that is pamphleteering. We will put the information out on a grassroots campaign to individuals, let them pass the information along, and we kind of put a 21st century spin to it because we have a website set up, and it's www.seizeliberty.com, and they go to our website and they'll see a big button that says Operation Dump Lion Ryan, which takes them to another page, and it deals with the whole issue. And everything that we have is available on the website. We have a 52-minute cassette tape that's available for free. We have thousands of these that are going out all over the state. People are making copies. We encourage people to make copies. Hand them out to your friends. Make as many copies as you want. We also have, on this cassette tape itself, is a audio of a compilation videotape that Carlos and I put together. And this composite compilation videotape is of 60 Minutes, American Justice, and a Chuck Gowdy special from Channel 7.
Is it an audio or video?
It is a video.
Okay.
The cassette tape, and on our website, they can go to the website and they can actually listen to the audio portion of the video. And it tells the whole story from the very beginning to the end to where Carlos ended up getting fired and why he got fired. And that's basically what we're doing, and what's so unique about it, we're having all different groups hand out the flyers because, as I said, we're not endorsing a particular candidate. We're just saying, folks, here's the reasons not to vote for Jim Ryan or Joe Burkett.
Yes. I want to just pass on to you, Carlos, and let's touch on the Nicaragua case, but I'll tell you, this case has been hashed and rehashed, and I think a lot of people are sick and tired of this. And even I, who was very dedicated to this case, I think it's time to move on, but the lessons of the Nicaragua case have not been learned, and that's where I am personally concerned, and this is why I've invited you to participate in this show. There's a legacy from the Nicaragua case of probably dozens, if not hundreds, of people who are sitting in the jail, wrongfully accused from anywhere from battery, where actually it never happened. Fights, arguments between people who falsely accuse other people, and then the state gets in the middle and the police, and whether until things can be sorted out, people are becoming absolutely victims of this almost police state. I know victims of domestic violence who have called me, never raised a hand on their spouse. He calls the police and says, I was just beaten up by my wife or by my former wife. Come and arrest her. And she's arrested. And I've asked some sheriffs, I've asked police, where is the logic? Why don't you, before you arrest people, before you throw them in jail, and then they have to bail themselves out for a few $100s, why not get the facts straight? So something's awfully wrong along the hierarchy of this whole investigative process.
I would agree. I think there is a major problem in the way that the police enforce policy, and that deals with the whole judicial system all the way on down to the law enforcement community. It's become a situation where I think it's more getting notches on their belt, if you will. It's more of scoring points so that they are eligible for promotion rather than dealing with the truth. And we see this quite often. We see cases that are tossed out on technical evidence, both for and against innocent people or guilty people. Let's be honest. But the point is, we no longer have a judicial system and the enforcement arm of that is interested in the truth. They're only interested in either what they can prove in court or what gets them elected or promoted. And I think there's a real problem there. And I think the Nicaragua case, even though this is an old thing going on almost 20 years, it still affected people's lives terribly, and it set a tone for law enforcement in DuPage County for the last 20 years. And the two main participants, or as I would say, Jim Ryan it was under his watch that a lot of the misuses of the system occurred.
Yeah, they sure did, yes.
He now wants to be governor of the whole state. And to me, you said it, a police state, that's rather scary as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I think people who are interested in maintaining our rights.
Well, I do receive phone calls because of the nature of this business, and some of the stories are alarming. I'll throw a few examples at you. We'll talk about your concerns about the Nicaragua, but recently a old Macedonian man, about this big, he's about 2 heads smaller than me, came with his wife to stay and visit his son who won the lottery to live in free America, the Golden State, the Golden Country. And they came to visit the son who just had a little baby. They were going to help with the baby so the husband and wife, the mother and father, could work. The grandpa, which is this man, Mr. Dimov is his name, got bored after 6 months. There's no Macedonian TV. There's no Macedonian books. He asked his son to find him some work. So the son spoke to the pastor, and they arranged some work for him in the Macedonian church here in DuPage County. He went there a couple times a week, clean, mow the grass, just loved it. He was also the kind of guy who loved to work and loved to keep things clean. One morning, a big busty woman, I've seen her in court, she's about 2 heads taller than him and about quite big, came in and approached him, and he thought she was going to embrace him as the Macedonians do and the Arab cultures do, one cheek and then the other cheek. She came at him and she held him, so he shoved her. She went away. 2 hours later, the police arrive at the church and they arrest him. He spent 2 years in jail, and if it wasn't for the work of Dr. Ludi, who contacted another attorney and said, do something about this man. He's sitting in jail. Public defender's office is doing nothing for him.
Plea bargaining, probably.
They're going to try and plea bargain, which they did. Because by that point, he was tired, sick, he had all kinds of health problems. He wanted to go home. And so this was his legacy of America, the DuPage County justice system. He bargained down to 6 months, battery or something. He never battered her. It was all a lie. But Burkett was so uninterested in what really happened. There were so many irregularities, and there were so many new things that were found about the accuser, such as mental illness, history of assaults. All those things should have been investigated by the police before they arrested this man. And I'm just wondering, where are we going to where you can just arrest a person and then figure out if they're guilty or not? This whole system is...
I think it's a huge problem, and it has to deal with our changing culture. And we, quite honestly, I believe that we are moving toward I hesitate to say it, but we're moving towards something that resembles a police state, where it is law and order, and you better be right and you better do things the right way or you're going to jail. It becomes a punitive society. We already have this Operation Tips thing where, we're supposed to spy on each other to watch out for terrorists. Well, who are terrorists? What are terrorists? That's the thing that bothers me, is what is the definition of that? Somebody who in a heated moment, in an argument over somebody talking in a movie theater says, I'm going to get you. Are they all of a sudden going to then be turned a terrorist? And all these draconian types of laws invoked against them? I really don't know. And I think it's a big problem, and I really don't think we can address that here. It's a bigger problem, I think, than we can just solve in DuPage County. But I think the key issue is we have 2 men who have been involved in law enforcement in DuPage County who seem to be relishing the ideas of using these kinds of police powers against innocent people. And I think the Nicaragua case primarily demonstrates their mentality and their mode of operation. And I think that's what we have to look at as to why they shouldn't be entrusted with any more power and authority in this state. Yes.
Yes. What are some of the issues that you've raised pertaining to the operation? Top 10 reasons why why to not vote.
Well, let me explain a little bit about what we have going on here. We have a packet of information supporting documents. It's available on the internet. They can download it in PDF file format if they want to.
Is that easy?
PDF? Yeah, it's by Adobe Acrobat, I believe, and it's just a way. It's a different way of reading documents.
I couldn't download your
We need to get somebody over to your place then who can load Acrobat files for you. Get the program, the Acrobat Reader, I believe is what it's called. Those who have it can get it. If not, well, you will have your own copy of the supporting documents by the end of tonight.
One more thing to read.
Yes. They are available. If people want hard copy and they don't want to go through getting them off of the website, they are available from us, and we're simply asking for a donation of $20. And not only do they get the hard copy, they get the cassette tape.
And
they also get the video tape along with it, and we'll give out our address later.
Because we're not allowed to promote.
We are not.
Here.
We are nonprofit. We are not asking. All the information's on the website. And if they want to go to that, they can check that out.
Okay.
What we're doing is just trying to give people the ammunition, the reasons that they can legitimately say, you know, these guys are not the lesser of two evils. I'm not going to vote for them. What we have are flyers. We have two main flyers, and we had some real fun at the DuPage County Fair when we started handing these out. People were not real happy. One of our flyers is the top 10 reasons why not to vote for Jim Ryan and Joe Burkett. The most important thing is that the Illinois Supreme Court held in People versus Cochran that the state's attorney in his official capacity is the representative of all the people, including the defendant, and it was as much his duty to safeguard the constitutional rights of the defendant as those of any other citizen. And what we do is we maintain that both Jim Ryan and Joe Burkett have not protected the rights of some defendants in DuPage County.
Especially since they prosecuted them.
Yes. And the other thing is that if it can happen to, as you suggested, that Macedonian man, if it can happen to Carlos, who is a former deputy sheriff, yes, it's happened to many people. It can happen to any of us if they're not going to do their job. And so our contention is that they have not honored their oaths of office to protect the people.
I agree.
So and that they are not the lesser of two evils. We have 10 top reasons. And we start with number 1, and that is, although DuPage County knew that they were innocent, Rolando Cruz, Alex Hernandez, and Stephen Buckley were indicted and tried with suppressed and false evidence for the rape and murder of 10-year-old Janine Nicarico.
Okay.
I think that's number 1 right there. We wouldn't be sitting here tonight if when Jim Ryan was then elected, was the state's attorney at the time, if he had just simply and honestly says, you know, there's some things not right here, rather than trying to seemingly keep the status quo going, keep the integrity and the legitimacy of their law enforcement moving ahead. If he had just sat back and been honest and said, you know, there's some things wrong here, we're going to be honest and open, we're going to get this thing straightened out.
You know what, and you can attest to that, there was this frenzy to find inmates who would throw mud at Cruz and lie if that what it took, lie. In the case of Hernandez, it was a little bit more difficult because Hernandez was in solitary confinement, out of self-imposed, to protect himself from the other inmates. So you couldn't fabricate jail testimony against Hernandez. So guess what they did? They fabricated a police testimony against him, and they started making up all kinds of funny stories.
I think that's why we have our first 3 reasons actually deal with the 3 prosecutions of Rolando Cruz.
Okay.
And the main thing here is after the third one, when he was on trial the 3rd time, and that's the reason we're actually here, is he was then targeted for murder. And that's what this gentleman did, a real hero. He stepped forward, he was able to stop the hit on Rolando Cruz, and for his efforts he was rewarded with being labeled a dirty cop, a secret Latin Kings gang member, and he was facilitating gang activity in DuPage County Jail. And all that information came from what we would call a jailhouse snitch, but he was more than that. He was somebody who was being coerced and threatened to give false testimony against Carlos.
Against Carlos.
And it wasn't until he was out and free from the control of DuPage County, that he was able to recant. And we have his affidavits recanting his testimony against Carlos.
He's doing it at great risk to his own life.
Yes, he is. We also have on the website, we have the affidavits from the Latin King's assassin that DuPage County approached to go and kill Rolando Cruz. Now, this is where I step on Carlos's toes, because he's the expert in this area.
Right, and we discussed that at great detail. We do have a show that goes through this whole thing. It's a 2-hour show.
Yes.
So unless there's something you want to say about it, I don't want to spend too much time with this, because I want to
with
cover
the details. Exactly.
Right.
Well, if we go through the other 10 points here.
Yes. Keep going.
Okay. Number 4 is DuPage County officials released Brian Dugan, the confessed killer of Janine Nicarico and a serial rapist and murderer. After Dugan was released, he went on to kill Melissa Ackerman and Donna Schnorr. Maybe Carlos can address that a little bit better.
You know what? Let me say in their favor that at that time nobody foresaw Dugan was at that time a little criminal. Nobody foresaw the other side and the danger, the very serious side of Dugan. Actually, there were some rapes.
Actually, if I can touch upon that.
Yes, because Randy Garrett spoke about that.
Right. I'm going to try to give a little information that wasn't made public. Being a former DuPage County Sheriff's deputy, and after my termination, I tried to learn a little bit more, and I do have some resources, and I've spoken to people that were involved in the case. Now, at one time, the FBI became involved in the case. Chief Teal, the Naperville police chief, they were checking out a different theory, the lone offender theory.
Of course. Well, that was the theory from the FBI from the very start.
Absolutely. And as far as Brian Dugan was concerned, he had 27 counts of burglary and assaults on women.
Right.
He fit the profile.
Right.
And the funny part is he was in the DuPage County Jail at the time. He was right under their nose on a different case.
Right.
A different offense, I should say. But they stayed away from that theory. They didn't want to look into the lone offender theory. They went to, nope, it's these guys. It's these three guys right here. Let's build our case. And as you know, you guys mentioned that I lost my job over it. I was one of the whistleblowers, but I was not the only whistle. I can't sit here and take credit for this. There were a number of not only law enforcement officers, but and he'll touch upon that.
Right.
If you want to go ahead.
Sure.
What you're saying is there were red flags already that
Yes.
Jim Ryan could have seen.
Yes.
And he ignored. And I'll comment on one of them later on.
Right. Number 5, and we've already touched on that. The 5th reason is Carlos Rodriguez, that he was unjustly he was unjustly fired, and he was framed as being a dirty cop when he wasn't.
This is a defamation.
Yeah.
You've got a defamation suit here, don't you?
Well, we're talking about that, yeah.
Number 6. Officer Rodney Watt. Now, this is not DuPage County.
Yes.
But Rodney Watt was the officer in Highland Park who whistle blew on the racial profiling that was going on in Highland Park. He was investigated. He had a lot of legal problems, and he wrote to Jim Ryan, help me in this. I'm being falsely accused. Jim Ryan did nothing to help him.
He was falsely accused of what?
So
to stop him from whistleblowing, they made it.
If I may, he went from being a candidate for Officer of the Year,
yes,
highly decorated, very well respected amongst the other officers. He came forward with the racial profiling, and he wrote a number of letters to Jim Ryan, and it fell on deaf ears.
He wouldn't help. Number 7.
Yes.
DuPage Detective John Sam resigned, forfeiting some retirement pension rather than be part of the corrupt prosecution. We have that on our tape as well. He's one of the law enforcement officials that Carlos mentioned.
He was truly a hero in this case.
Yes, yeah. He tried to get them back on track. They wouldn't do it. Number 8, a very important gentleman, State Police Investigator Commander Ed Sosowski. He ended up retiring early because enough of this, because his name was dragged through the mud by Jim Ryan. I'll let Carlos jump in on. speak on Ed's behalf, so to speak.
Yeah, I've had the privilege, and I say privilege, and the honor to meet Commander Ed Sosowski. And Ed Sosowski was a person who was very well respected, very thorough investigator. He was brought into the case. They wanted to have a separate investigation to try to keep the integrity. He was brought into the case, and he was asked to investigate it to see if it was possible if Brian Dugan did indeed commit this murder. So he went off to interview Brian Dugan, and I believe there was a polygraph.
Yes, polygraph. There's the hypnosis. We have that on the tape too. The hypnosis video, polygraph. We have that information in the packet.
And what's amazing about this is after about a year and after interviewing approximately 80 witnesses, he came back to Sheriff Doria and Jim Ryan at the time and said, guys, you have the wrong man on death row. Your man is Brian Dugan. And he was vilified by Jim Ryan.
Right. He wrote a letter to Hardigan.
Yes, that's also in our package. And the funny thing about this is that they had handwritten notes taken by Robert Callander,
Chief Judge now.
who's now the Chief Judge when he was a state's attorney, handwritten notes, which we also have in our package, a copy of his actual handwritten notes that had 50, was it? 50
matching facts.
50. They never shared this with Commander Sosowski. And the funny part is here they're writing a letter to the Attorney General asking that Sosowski himself be brought up on charges of official misconduct,
when they
obstructing justice when they had this information.
Because they accused him of leading the witness.
Right, right.
So, I mean, they're asking the Attorney General, Neil Hardigan at the time, to bring Ed Sosowski up on charges. And, I mean,
Talk about manipulative.
Right, and all this time, Jim Ryan or Joe Burkett, who was on his management team advising him on how to conduct this whole case, they, at any point along the way here, these guys could have said, okay, look, we got to come clean on this. We've made some mistakes. We're going to go after the right guy. And I think the public is very forgiving when somebody comes forward and is honest and says, you know what, we've messed up, we made a mistake, we're sorry, we're going to straighten this whole thing out, instead of constantly covering it up with one lie after another lie after another lie. Let's move on, the last two. Number 9, the crime lab director, Gilman, resigned rather than falsify the physical evidence as demanded by the state's attorney's office in DuPage County. I think there was a lab technician who said that some shoe prints didn't match, and they wanted to suppress that evidence.
That was Phil Gilman who said it doesn't match.
Yeah.
And they said, well, don't write a report. Let's forget about this.
Exactly.
not only forget about it, but they actually retrieved those boots. They actually retrieved the boots from the lab, the way we understood it.
And sent it to another person out of state.
Sure.
I'm not real clear on those particular
and
details.
got some questionable results, so then they shipped it to this so-called I don't know how to, what was her name, Robbins? I forget her name. She was some kind of an ethnologist who...
Well, they sent it to somebody who finally gave him the answer that they wanted to use.
Yes, it was this woman, and then she died of cancer.
Yeah.
Well, and then last but not least, of course, early on, Assistant Illinois Attorney General Mary Kenney resigned rather than try to block one of the appeals. Once it went to death row, that's when the automatic appeal process goes. The Attorney General is supposed to automatically block the appeals.
That was Roland.
Roland Burris.
That was Roland Burris, and I have never forgiven Roland Burris for that, and he'll never get my vote. Here's an example where an Attorney General needs to represent the people, and one of his trusted employees says to him, Burris, there's a mistake here. Let's look at it. And he just says, I don't want to say what.
It's the terrible mix, and I'm borrowing. You can maybe remember who said that on the video. I don't remember if it was Tom Breen. One of the lawyers for Cruz said, when you have a terrible mix of politics and prosecution, that this is where it seems to it's like a teeter-totter. It's weighted too much in favor of the state rather than in the favor of the defense.
Do you think
Right.
Do you think that politics and prosecutorial jobs should be completely separate? Because I think
From
they
politics?
should. I mean, look at the case out of Elmhurst, Mesna Perez, daycare provider, child dies in her care, some serious medical prior issues. Mesna gets accused of this crime. The case goes on for 4 years, and it's been delayed and delayed and delayed because there was a primary election. There's now the general election.
Right.
Wingate will not try the case until he knows the outcome of the elections. And she's held hostage for 4 years. She
Right.
can't work. She can't do anything. The stress of being
Can't
falsely
leave the
accused.
state.
Can't leave the state.
Right. Once again, this goes to a law enforcement and a prosecutorial culture that has been developing in this country.
Right.
And I don't know that we can address that specifically because you have to deal with legislators, you have to deal with laws changing. It's a long, drawn-out process. But I do think that part of the problem is that these people are rewarded on the basis of successful prosecutions, not on the basis of whether it was true, if the person was truly guilty or not.
Yes.
And I think that's an inherent part of the problem. What we really have to deal with specifically here in DuPage County is, are Jim Ryan and Joe Burkett quality, honest, forthright people that we would trust to give a fair shake to one of our children if they somehow fell into the snare of DuPage County law enforcement? I think that's the issue.
That's
Would
the
they get a
issue.
fair shake?
What troubled me though is that if you are in their league, if you have donated to them, I have seen cases of people who have gotten off or never been prosecuted.
There has always
because they
been
donated to these campaigns.
Sure, there's always the inside thing. There's always going to be the inside thing, but that shouldn't deter us from going toward the ideal of American justice. I mean, justice stands there with a blindfold over her eyes, holding a sword and a scale that's supposed to be equal and fair. Well, right, she's kind of peeking out from underneath.
You're fighting that.
But those are the top 10 reasons that we have not to vote for these two people. And that is primarily what the campaign is. As I said, it's a grassroots thing. People are encouraged to pick up the material, copy the material off the website. We will send it to them. We'll be very happy to do that. All they have to do is contact us. And if I can give out the phone number.
Absolutely.
Sure. It's area code 630-359-4504. And we would be very happy to talk with them and answer any questions that they have on the issue and direct them as to how they can obtain some of this material. We also have a whole bunch of business cards that have on it nothing more than Operation Dump Lion Ryan and our website, and that we're just giving out for free.
I think
that's petition.
And you're not referring to George Ryan.
No, well, you know,
case.
in this case,
Do you have any opinion about George Ryan?
he's a lame duck, and I won't give him another second thought because I'm more concerned with not having another Ryan.
Well, he's on his way
the
out the
State
door,
House.
so
Yes.
Exactly. One last thing, Carlos brought it up. We have a petition online, and our petition is simply, it's a public opinion type of petition. It carries no legal weight, but we're working in conjunction with the Coalition for Justice, a group out of Chicago, and what we're trying to do is get a lot of people to send these petitionary letters or sign the petition to Joe Burkett to finally, after 20-some years, almost 20 years, indict Brian Dugan.
Good luck.
Well, let's just talk about the evidence they have against Brian Dugan.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, we have his DNA,
I know. I mean,
his confession, the fact that on February 25th, 1983, he didn't show up for work. Witnesses put him at the crime scene. State workers put him on the Illinois Prairie Path. His vehicle matches the description.
and they saw one guy on the prairie path and not three,
Right.
although there was a theory that the two others hid under the car, or
Well, it's a wonderful theory, but there's no physical
They were
evidence to
abducted by
back
alien
it up.
life form.
Oh,
There
there
was
were-
not.
that's a
Yes,
good one.
yes, there is just absolutely nothing there to back that up. So, yeah, there
It's an
are some
open and
major
shut case.
problems.
Yes.
He has
it's an open and shut case.
he has more evidence on this than he ever did with the
The Cruz and Hernandez.
well, even this gentleman that you brought up, the Macedonian gentleman.
Macedonian man, yes.
And anybody else, but we want to send the message. Tim read through these 10 points, and we're talking about a lot of law enforcement people who lost their jobs.
Yes.
We're talking about the lead detective, Illinois State Police investigator, a crime lab technician, a prosecutor. It was her job to defeat the death row appeal.
Well, some of those cases resigned.
Yes, but
But in
some of
their
those
career.
but in some of those cases, like for example, for mine and Ed Sosowski, what we share in common is they brought us up on charges.
Right.
And here's the funny thing, because we talk about they can convict anybody, they can convict you.
Oh yeah,
If
I'm waiting to see what they're going to find on me.
If they can do this to one of their own, someone who wears the same badge, the same uniform, and takes the same oath to serve and protect, do you think anybody else has a chance? And then they wonder why FOP and the Illinois
Fraternal
State
Order of Police.
Yes.
and the Illinois State Police aren't backing
Jim
Ryan. I believe he said his opponent, Blagojevich.
Blagojevich, yes.
He's saying that it's because he's got all the labor muscle behind him, and he's owned and operated. I read in the paper. That's not the truth. I mean, does an honest law enforcement official really want this person in office after he's done this to all these other law enforcement people? He needs to wake up and he needs to start being honest.
There's too many questions about Mr. Ryan.
I think that's the issue. There are just way too many questions.
And he won't come forth and answer them.
He's not forthright.
In an honest-to-God, face-to-face interview.
Right. He has too many conflicts of interest. I seem to be that constantly is the reason between Joe Burkett and Jim Ryan, especially in.
Well, they're copycats.
Well, especially when it comes to all their relationships with other law people here in DuPage County and in the area. When somebody else gets in trouble, you talked about. I don't know if we'd call. I don't think nepotism is necessarily the right term, but there seems to be this fraternity. Okay.
There is.
And when one of them does something wrong, and I believe it's the Eccles case,
Yes.
where I guess there was a problem with child support. And we have the letters that Jim Ryan and Joe Burkett both wrote to, I believe her name's Carrie, that they couldn't do anything to enforce the child support that the court had ordered because, there's a conflict of interest. Now, what does anybody do in a situation like
I know,
that?
because
now, I
there's
understand
many
they
former
settled it
wives,
eventually,
there's
but
many former wives of attorneys that worked and were friends of this clique, of this good old boy network. What happens to all those other Carrie Eccles,
Right. So I think the thing that we're trying to get across is that there are just too many questions, too many problems with Jim Ryan and Joe Burkett. In fact, one of the things is we're going to be putting out another flyer that says don't rely on Jim Ryan. Don't rely on Ryan, I think is the direction we're going to go with that one. And list if you fall into certain categories, he won't do anything for you. He can't. Or Joe also. And it's really sad. I think it's really sad that we've come to this state of affairs that a shoestring operation, a private little law club has to take the front point on this, put out flyers, put out cassette tapes, set up a website, because something isn't getting out to the people. And I don't want to pull away from what I think is really one of the other crucial issues here, and that is the attempted murder of Rolando Cruz while he was supposed to be incarcerated. And the fact that
awaiting the third trial,
awaiting the third trial,
exactly.
And how this whole thing happened, I think, is a very interesting story. I think it's a compelling story.
I'm still trying to find out why the media will not cover this, unless they don't want to believe it happened.
It could be. I mean, what more do you want? I mean, you have signed affidavits under penalty of perjury. These things would stand up in court. In fact, Asensio has testified in court in the Herrera case.
Yes, but what's more compelling is anybody can say, okay, it's just his word, he's a convicted felon. We just can't take his word for it, and I agree. But I believe the last time we were on your show, and we do have the writs,
right.
And what a writ is, it's a transfer order to be able to transfer one inmate from one location to another, and we showed you, and it's on our website. People can see it, how they manufactured it, how they manufactured the writ, how they made it look like he was coming from one facility that was a medium security. They didn't mention it was a maximum security because then they knew they couldn't put him in the general population.
Right.
But then when their own investigators caught it, and they brought it up to the attention of the sheriff, and they sent this guy back, they had to write another writ, and they orchestrated that one. They engineered that one, and it's on our website.
And of course, you can't bring this up to Jim Ryan because he's not going to investigate.
Well, it would be a
that.
conflict, yeah.
Right. I wonder if
interest.
Lisa Madigan wins the election, if she would look into this whole thing.
It's a good speculation. Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope with
so, yeah.
that whoever gets in, whatever, and I hope it's fresh blood that gets into that level of state operation, will look into some of these things. But back to the situation of them wanting to kill Rolando Cruz. When Carlos found out about this, he found out that the guy who was doing, had been approached,
To kill him.
The would-be hitman.
the would-be
Asensio.
hitman, they knew had known each other when they were children.
Right.
And whereas Carlos went on to be a Marine Corps hero, Asensio went on and became a top enforcer with the Latin Kings. And Carlos was able to talk to him man to man, face to face, say, look, they won't honor their deal with you to let you out early if you get this done. It's not going to go well. He got him to get the hit stopped, but because he did that and stopped the whole thing, they took one of the Asensio's helpers.
Yeah, one of his.
Why don't you tell the story? It's all about you.
Yeah, well, the meeting with Asensio, 3 other inmates, his would-be co-conspirators and people that would carry out the hit.
If Cruz was out, if he had, there was options to either kill him in the jail or if he got out of the jail to kill him.
Well,
in
you know
the
what's funny about this is, as you know, the Cruz trial ended abruptly.
Right.
Lieutenant Montesano took the stand and he admitted to lying about the so-called vision statement, and he was
To
immediately
receiving a phone call from the two detectives.
he was immediately released. And you know what happened after that? The Department of Justice. The department, not too many people are aware of this, but the Department of Justice started writing letters, said we're going to start investigating this because we believe that Cruz and Hernandez, their civil rights had been violated. Prosecutorial misconduct. The FBI was going to start investigating this, and they took the so-called initiative to run a parallel investigation. They brought in William Kunkel, and they were
DuPage
able,
County,
right?
Jim
They were
Ryan.
able. They were able to manipulate. They were able to indict the people they wanted to indict. They were able to hold the trials here, and you know, it's funny because that was a parallel investigation. But if you ask Jim Ryan now, hey, why didn't you investigate George Ryan? You know, the license for bribe scandal? He'll tell you, well, it was a parallel investigation. I couldn't do that. It would be improper. The FBI was investigating it. And there was another conflict of
Oh, I see.
interest.
So while Kunkel was quote-unquote investigating, I don't think he was really investigating. I think he was part of the good old boys. He did a terrible job in the trial. Of course, I was thrown out of court. I wasn't allowed to watch it.
Right. No, what I'm saying is...
But I saw a little bit. And
is the Department of Justice had already made their decision prior to Bill Kunkel ever coming in.
I think what we start to see here is that a parallel investigation is bad for Jim Ryan if it possibly won't go the way that he wants it to go.
Exactly.
A jailhouse snitch is bad if he's going to be testifying against Jim Ryan. Whereas if you turn it conversely, oh, these are wonderful, good things. And I think it's the hypocrisy that shocks the conscience the most.
Well, it's just the nature of the beast. When you start lying, when you get into this culture of lying, you just get into a web that you can't wriggle yourself out of. So that really the best policy is honesty.
Absolutely.
And I'll never forget that story. We learned it in English. I grew up in Israel. There was an English curriculum book. It says, honesty is the best policy. And my father was the English teacher. And I always said, boy, that was a great story. And it just is a lesson for life. Lying doesn't work.
Well, the nice thing about telling the truth is you just don't have to try and remember all your lies. And you do the best that you can with it. And
I know.
you can't blackmail an honest person, because an honest, upright person will stand up and simply say, "You're right, I was wrong, I'm sorry, I'll take my
Yes,
lumps."
right.
You can't, that's it. Well, these guys haven't done that. And it's constantly obfuscation after obfuscation over all these issues. And I think that's the important thing. And I just don't want to leave the concept here is that they coerced, people in DuPage County coerced a guy by the name of Michael Henner, who is the one who turned against Carlos. And they coerced him into testifying against Carlos. And he didn't want to. And we have the paperwork.
He was forced to.
He was forced to. He was threatened with not getting a furlough to go see his mother had
Unfortunately
died.
for him, after we put the meeting together, he went and told his attorney, which you can tell your attorney anything. It's attorney-client privileged information. But unfortunately for him, he didn't know that his attorney, I believe, used to be a state's attorney. He still had friends on the other side.
Well, they all
part of the good old boy network.
So he went, after he told his attorney went and told everybody in DuPage, and they said, "Oops, we got to." So what they did was they went to this inmate and they said, "Oh, you're going to say that there was a meeting held, but not because Deputy Rodriguez tried to prevent any violence or to stop any corruption, but because he was a dirty cop, and that's what you're going to testify to. And if you don't, you could get hurt." His mother had passed away. He was trying to get furloughed to attend his mother's funeral. They were denying everything. And luckily for them, they had him under control. And the funny thing is, after I was fired, a law enforcement or any public servant in the state of Illinois who falls under administrative law, when they're terminated, they have 35 days to appeal their case. They just simply had to hold on to him for 35 days. And now that the truth is coming out, rather than them denying it or fighting it, they're just saying, hey, they're telling the higher courts, you can't hear this case because he didn't appeal within 35 days.
And that's the basis of their argument against your appeals.
What's the law about finding new information?
That's what Carlos and his attorneys are trying to bring out, is that his case falls underneath that exclusion or that exception
There is a relief
to the rule.
Right, because
it's
Henner
new
just
evidence.
Came, 2 years, 3 years later?
Yes, we're going under newly discovered evidence. Because they concealed it, and because they
Threatened him.
they corruptly, threatened this person's life.
They coerced him to perjure himself.
Yeah,
Basically, they perjured themselves.
And then when he was about to tell the truth, then they threatened his life, and they, they had control over him because he was on probation. They just
3-year probation.
They just held that over his head. Like, if you talk about the Rodriguez affair, then that's it. We're going to violate your probation. And we, and now that he's done with his probation, and now that everything's done, he's trying to tell the truth. And the case is in front of the Illinois Supreme Court.
Has he received any threats for his life?
Yes.
An interesting threat, I was just trying to find it in here.
Can I tell you something about threats?
Oh, sure, please. It's your show.
Yes. There is a woman in Downers Grove who sold a car to a car dealer. He sold the car, but he never paid her. And she tried to get him to pay her. And she went to Burkett. She went to the Downers Grove police. She asked to pursue this guy. And they can't get, as far as I know, they can't pursue him because he's a big donator to Burkett. And he actually told 2 friends of mine, he came to that civil thing with Ralph Nader 3-4 years ago. He was going all over the place bragging about his connections with Burkett.
If I may, it comes down to arrogance. And I think Tim is going to show us... Well, Tim is going to show us a good example of arrogance.
Well, it came down to this, is that Michael Henner, when he got free, he signed, he put out his affidavits, and in one of his affidavits he talks about how that during the DuPage 7 trial, when he was still on probation, he was hauled into DuPage County. They held him for 90 days, I believe, during that time. Yeah. And during that time, he testifies that they took him down into the basement.
And keep in mind, the DuPage 7 trial is going at this time. So while at the court building, DuPage trial's taken.
Michael Henner's in the basement.
Michael Henner's in the next building in the
in the
basement.
basement.
At times, they didn't keep him in the
Yeah, it
basement,
was
but I
just-
understand that
Right.
prisoners are not supposed to go
Right.
into the basement.
Unless-
And Michael, in his affidavit, drew a map of
Yes.
what the basement layout is, and
Of course, have you been in the basement?
Oh, yeah.
So it was true.
yes,
It was a
and they
true-
threatened
Well,
him.
according to his diagram, yes, it's very accurate, and he signs his sworn affidavit on August 25th of 2000.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, after DuPage then finally settled the Cruz suits, and they got
A month later.
$3.5 million.
Which
One-
isn't very much. by
No,
the way.
no, not at all. Michael McMahon, who is a Republican county board member from Hinsdale, said this, quote, "If it was up to me, we'd take these three guys into the basement and shoot them," unquote. He said before voting to accept the deal.
This was said 1
Well,
month
that same
after the sworn
McMahon got his
affidavit.
neighbor, an old matronly Hinsdale resident, arrested for some cuckamaniac allegation. She was arrested while she was in a restaurant with all her little old friends, accused falsely of something that McMahon's family accused her of. And of course, she was found not guilty, but Burkett wanted her to plead guilty and he'd give her a lesser charge. And she said, "Forget it, Mr. Burkett." And I know.
Did she win or?
She won. She won.
Well, that's good
She
because
could afford a good lawyer.
there's too much. It is a specific legal
But
thing
that's
called
the McMahon
malicious.
family, and they're all
Yeah.
connected to each other, and they're all.
I was going to say
big
there's a term that's
supporters.
called malicious use of prosecution.
Well, that's what's happening here.
Unfortunately, it takes then the court to decide whether or not it has occurred. And if you have,
In DuPage County, are you telling me you'll find a judge who will look into this?
well, my doubts are the same as yours. I think there needs to be a.
Will never happen.
Oh, I don't know about
Not in
never.
my
Never say
lifetime.
never.
Well-
But I think the thing is, and this is a very important issue as well, when the people lose faith and confidence in the judicial and the law
And I
enforcement
have lost
system,
it. I have lost it.
they no longer have the support of the common person. They no longer have the goodwill of the people. You create a situation in society that can lead toward anarchy, and it leads towards anarchy because it's a misuse of the police power that we entrust to these people who are supposed to be our servants. They create the situation by their misuse, and if we have no way to correct the situation through the courts or through the legal system, how do we do it? How do we correct it? At this point in time, we've got the ballot box, and that's why we're telling people. I think we got plenty of evidence as to why people should not vote for Jim Ryan and Joe Burkett. It's that simple.
Well, I want to wish you good luck
Thank you.
for representing the people and working so hard to do your jobs. And I wish you luck with your lawsuits.
Thank you.
And I think you will probably win. And I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming. For Community Focus, I'm Hannah Bernstein, and we would love to hear from you. My email will be listed. Their website will be listed. If you have any comments, negative or positive, we want to hear everything. So we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.